Don't turn me away. I can give you what no other woman will, said the Apache woman in the cold. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.
Cold wind pressed across the Nevada high desert in steady bursts that shook dry sagebrush and scraped loose dust along the hardened ground, while Cole Harrow returned from the far fence line with the slow, measured walk of a man used to long distances and long hours alone. His coat held a thin layer of frost, and his gloves were stiff from gripping wire all afternoon. His limp showed more clearly whenever the temperature dropped, a permanent reminder of the accident 3 winters ago when a horse rolled on him during a late-night thunderstorm. He never talked about it, but the injury changed how he worked, how he moved, and how he planned each day. Cole lived alone for good reason. He had once tried building a life with someone, years back, a woman who trusted him more than he deserved. A group of drunken men caused a violent confrontation in a mining town, and Cole failed to get her out fast enough. He carried the guilt the way other men carried tools, always on hand, never forgotten. Solitude became his way of staying in control. He woke, worked, and slept without interruptions. That was his mission now: keep the ranch standing, keep trouble far away, and keep people even farther. He reached the last stretch before the cabin, boots crunching lightly over frozen dirt. The place stood plain and worn. One room, a leaning porch, a small barn that needed repairs he kept putting off. He glanced at the woodpile beside the steps, expecting to see the usual stack of uneven logs. Something was wrong. A shape was pressed close against the wall, smaller than a person at first glance, but too uneven to be any tool or blanket he owned. Cole slowed his steps immediately. His heartbeat didn't jump, but the air around him felt tight. He scanned the yard, the trail to the west, the shadows near the barn. He didn't see tracks, but the wind had been blowing strong enough earlier to erase thin prints. He took 2 steps closer. The shape shifted. A young Apache woman lifted her head, her breath coming in short, uneven pulls. Frost covered part of her hair, and the deerskin top she wore clung tightly to her chest, torn along the edge. Her skirt was thin, too thin for a night like this, stiff with cold and dirt. Her legs were pulled inward, trying to conserve heat. Cole's jaw tightened. He didn't move forward, he didn't move back. Years of cautious living trained him to study every detail before acting. She braced one hand against the wall, trying to push herself upright. Her wrist shook violently under the attempt, and she barely managed to lift her shoulder before her strength failed. "Don't!" Her first sound barely came out. She swallowed hard, forcing her body to obey. "Don't turn me away." Her voice held no confidence, just exhaustion, fear, and the memory of too many nights surviving by convincing dangerous men not to hurt her. "I can offer you what no white woman will." The words hit him sharply, not because of the offer, but because they sounded like something she had been forced to say before. A learned line, a survival strategy, a last resort. It stirred something in him he tried to bury. Anger at the kind of men who pushed a woman into believing her body was the only currency she had left. Cole finally spoke. "You don't owe me anything." His tone was low but steady, the same tone he used when calming frightened horses. Her body swayed. Her knee nearly hit the ground. He opened the cabin door immediately. Warm, dim light spilled across the porch. Inside, he said, "You're shaking too hard to stay out here." She didn't move at first. Her eyes scanned the yard in every direction, as if expecting someone to burst out of the dark. Only after she saw nothing did she push herself up, slow and uneven, and step through the doorway. Inside, the stove glowed a muted orange. The smell of burned wood and old coffee hung in the air. Cole closed the door and secured the latch with a quiet click. He did out of habit, not fear, but Nayla watched his hands closely, ready to react if the movement hinted at danger. She crouched near the stove almost instantly, palms hovering inches from the heat. Her breathing was quick at first, then slowed as warmth reached her fingers. Her shoulders shook with leftover tremors that she couldn't hide. Cole stayed near the door, coat still on, studying her carefully. He noticed everything: The dried blood near her collarbone, the bruise circling her ankle, the rough imprint on her wrists where rope or metal had been recently tightened. "Name?" he asked quietly. "Nayla," she said, barely lifting her head. She didn't ask for his. She didn't look around the cabin. She didn't reach for anything except the heat. Every movement showed someone expecting harm at any moment, someone who had learned to anticipate violence before it arrived. Cole moved to the small cabinet and took out a folded blanket. It wasn't fancy, stitched unevenly, faded edges, but it was clean and warm. He set it beside her without stepping into her space. "For you," he said. She reached toward it slowly, watching him over her shoulder the entire time. When her hands closed around it, she held it tightly against her chest like something she feared would be taken away. He removed his coat and hung it on a nail near the door, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settle onto him, even though he didn't ask for it. He wasn't a man who offered his home to strangers, but leaving her outside would have been the same as killing her. Silence filled the cabin, not strained, not angry, just heavy with everything both of them were hiding. Cole kept his distance, but his thoughts kept circling the same points. Who had held her captive? How close were they? Had she been followed? Nayla sat with the blanket wrapped around her shoulders, warming her hands, but her eyes kept drifting to the windows, checking for movement she expected to see. Cole noticed all of it. He didn't speak, didn't question her, didn't push. He knew fear when he saw it. He also knew pushing for answers too early could make a frightened person shut down entirely. He checked the latch once more, then stepped to the side wall and studied the outside darkness through a narrow gap in the shutters. The yard looked empty, but that didn't calm him. People who hunted others rarely made loud entrances. He stood there for several minutes, deciding whether he needed to bring the rifle inside or whether doing so would make her panic. Nayla, watching him quietly, adjusted the blanket and curled her legs closer. Her body still trembled, but her breathing had steadied, the fire warming her enough that her fingers no longer stiffened with cold. She didn't thank him. She looked like someone who had run out of formal words long ago. Cole didn't need thanks. He walked to the stove, adjusted the vent, then stepped back. His movements were deliberate, predictable, careful, enough to keep her from flinching. When he finally sat on the chair nearest the door, the cabin settled into a new stillness. Two strangers, both carrying old damage, both unsure of the other's intentions, both forced into the same small room by weather and fate. Nayla leaned closer to the stove, eyelids heavy. Her voice came out faint, barely above a whisper. "Are you going to send me away in the morning?" Cole looked at her, serious. "Not until you can stand without shaking." For the first time, something in her expression eased. Not trust, not relief, but the smallest shift towards safety. Cole leaned back in the chair, eyes on the window, refusing to let exhaustion pull him under. Nayla had escaped someone who might still be searching. And Cole was already preparing himself for whoever came looking. The night deepened, cold and quiet, and inside that small cabin a fragile, unspoken agreement formed. Unplanned, unwanted, but real. Neither of them knew how long it would hold, but for the moment they stayed. Gray light crept into the cabin with the first minutes of dawn, spreading across the floorboards in thin lines while the stove's last embers gave off a faint orange glow. Cole Harrow had not slept. He sat in the same chair where he'd been all night, elbows resting against his knees, eyes fixed on the narrow crack between the shutters where he could see a slice of the yard. He listened for hooves, for creaking wagon wheels, for any sign that someone had followed Niela's trail. There was nothing, only quiet desert wind rolling between the sagebrush. Across the room, Niela lay wrapped in the blanket he had given her, curled near the stove with her knees drawn up, breathing in slow, steady pulls that came from the kind of exhaustion that overtook fear only when a body had nothing left. Her hair had fallen across her cheek in uneven strands. Cole noticed how tightly she held the edges of the blanket, as if letting go might change her situation instantly. She woke suddenly. Her eyes snapped open, and she pushed herself upright in one movement, scanning the cabin for danger before her breath caught in her chest. Realizing she had not been moved or restrained, She let her shoulders lower slightly, though tension stayed in her neck. Cole spoke first. "Morning." His voice was rough from a night without rest, but calm. Naila glanced toward the windows, then toward the door, then back to him. Her jaw tightened with a hesitant kind of confusion. She wasn't used to waking in a place where nothing bad had happened overnight. "Did anyone come?" she asked quietly. "Not that I could see." Cole rose from the chair, joints stiff. "I'll check outside before we make a fire." The moment he moved toward the door, she tensed. Her hand rose slightly, as if to reach for him, then dropped quickly, almost embarrassed by her own instinct. "Please don't leave me inside alone," she said. The words were controlled, but carried the weight of someone who had been enclosed in dark spaces for too long. Cole stopped. He didn't step back toward her, but he didn't open the door either. He studied her posture, the way she leaned her body slightly toward the corner of the room where she would have the widest view of the space. He understood the meaning behind it. "All right," he said simply. "Come with me." Naila stood carefully. Her legs trembled from the cold floor, but she steadied herself with one hand on the stove frame. Her skirt brushed against her knees, the beads clinking softly as she moved. She walked to him with cautious steps, keeping the blanket tight around her shoulders. Cole opened the door slowly. A rush of morning air swept in, cold enough to sting the lungs, but free of the sharp hostility the night often held. They stepped onto the porch together. Naila's eyes moved quickly across the landscape. Sagebrush, frost-covered earth, a sky washed out by weak sunlight. No wagons, no riders, no tracks. Cole walked down the steps with her close behind. He scanned the dirt near the barn and the open stretch behind the cabin. The ground held only the faint marks left by his boots and his horse from the previous day. No fresh prints, no wheel imprints, no sign of pursuit. "They didn't follow," he said. Naila's breath left her weakly. Relief looked strange on her face, like she didn't trust it. She wrapped the blanket tighter and forced herself to believe the truth she saw with her own eyes. "Those men kept me in a wagon," she said quietly, hidden behind a canvas sheet. "They stopped only at night." Cole didn't interrupt. "They argued yesterday," she continued, voice steadying as she spoke. "One wanted to sell me in Ridgepoint. The other said the price wasn't worth the trouble." Cole felt a familiar heaviness settle in his stomach. He had heard similar stories before during his years working near mining camps. None ended well unless the woman escaped, if she survived long enough to try. "You walked away from them," he said. "That's not nothing." Naila lowered her gaze. "They were drunk. They didn't time me well." Cole looked at the bruises on her wrists, dark and swollen. He kept his expression controlled, but inside, anger crawled beneath his ribs. He didn't direct it at her, only at the men who had treated her like cargo. "You'll stay here until you're stronger," he said. Naila stared at him as though uncertain whether he meant it. "You don't even know me. You're cold and hurt." "That's enough." A long silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just the kind that carried new understanding. Cole turned toward the barn. "I need to feed the horse. You can help if you want." Her reaction was immediate. She nodded once, quick but firm, as if the idea of remaining near someone steady made her feel less exposed. Inside the barn, the smell of hay and dust filled the air. The morning light came through a cracked board, brightening the space in a sharp line. Cole filled a bucket with grain, while Naila stood near the door, taking in everything: the tools, the saddle on its stand, the patched blankets, the way Cole moved with quiet familiarity. "You live alone here?" she asked. "Yes." "Why?" Cole stopped scooping grain. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he set the bucket down and walked toward the stall. "Some things don't get easier," he said. "So I stopped trying to fix them." Naila absorbed that in silence. She didn't push for explanation. Something in her expression said she understood more than most would. Cole stepped out of the stall, brushing hay from his shirt. "Your job today is to stay warm and eat something. I'll handle the chores." She hesitated. "I can help." "Later," he said, when her legs stopped shaking. She didn't argue. The honesty in his tone didn't invite resistance. On the walk back to the cabin, Naila kept pace beside him instead of behind him. Her steps were uneven but deliberate. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't waiting for orders. She was watching him the way someone watches a place they might finally be safe. Inside, Cole added wood to the stove. Nayla leaned against the table with the blanket still wrapped around her, eyes following his movements with a mixture of curiosity and guarded hope. When the fire caught fully, warming the room, she spoke in a quieter voice. "Do you want me to leave once I can walk without shaking?" Cole looked up at her. His answer came without hesitation. "No." Niela's breath caught, small but unmistakable. Something shifted behind her eyes. Cole didn't push the moment further. He simply went back to tending the fire, keeping his voice steady as he said, "You're safe here." For the first time, she believed it. The sun climbed slowly over the desert ridge, turning the frost on the ground into thin patches of mist that drifted around the sagebrush. Cole Harrow stepped out of the cabin with a bucket of scraps in one hand and a coil of rope in the other, his movements quiet and structured. He didn't speak right away. He rarely did in the morning. Routine helped him think, and thinking helped him stay ahead of whatever trouble might come. Behind him, Nayla stood in the doorway with the blanket still around her shoulders. She held it differently now, less like armor, more like something she chose willingly. Her legs were steadier than they had been the night before, though she kept close to the doorframe, testing the air with cautious breaths. Cole glanced at her only once, just enough to check she was awake and stable, then continued toward the small clearing where he fed the stray dogs that occasionally wandered close. He set the bucket down, letting the animals come on their own, no sudden movements, no calls. He worked the same way with people, quiet, steady, predictable. Nayla watched him from the porch, studying the methodical way he created space instead of demanding it. When he returned, she stepped outside fully, letting her bare feet touch the cold ground. Her body tensed at the first shock of it, but she didn't pull back. Cole opened the gate near the barn, and she followed him through instinctively, as if staying close felt safer than holding still. "I want to help today," she said. Her voice wasn't shaky now, just soft, unsure of how much she was allowed to ask. Cole didn't stop walking. "You can carry the smaller logs. Only if your hands don't hurt." She looked down at her wrists, turning them slightly. The bruises were dark and still swollen, but she didn't complain. "I can manage." They reached the woodpile, a low stack of uneven cuts Cole had prepared last week. Nayla crouched, tested the weight of a small log, and lifted it with both hands. Her movement wasn't smooth, but she kept her grip steady. Cole watched her quietly, noting the determination in her posture. "You don't have to prove anything," he said. "I know." She kept working, eyes lowered, breath controlled. The two of them carried wood to the porch in steady trips, her with small pieces, him with larger loads. The morning air warmed gradually, and with every trip back and forth, Niela's shoulders loosened, her steps lengthened, and her gaze wandered farther from the cabin walls. After finishing, she leaned against the porch rail, catching her breath. Cole set the last log down and stood beside her, arms folded loosely across his chest. "You did well," he said. She looked at him briefly, almost startled by the praise, then nodded with a small, careful smile. It wasn't wide or sure, but it was the first one he'd seen from her. Cole didn't return the smile. Not because he didn't feel anything. He just didn't know how to show it without feeling strange. A faint rumble in the distance pulled his attention toward the trail leading east. It wasn't loud enough to be hooves or wheels, more like the shift of wind across distant rock formations. Still, Cole stepped away from the porch and scanned the horizon until he was certain no riders were approaching. Nayla watched him with quiet understanding. "You expect them to come back," she said. "I expect anyone to come back," he answered. "Not just them." She pulled the blanket tighter. "I don't know how many there were. How many were in the wagon?" "3. But sometimes others join them at night." Cole's jaw tightened. He looked at her wrists again, at the faint shaking in her fingers. "We'll make sure none of them get near here," he said. The tone he used wasn't loud, but it carried solid promise. Nayla nodded slowly, absorbing that. Inside the cabin, she helped him prepare a simple midday meal. She chopped dried roots with short, careful strokes while Cole sliced the last of the salted meat. The atmosphere was quiet, but not strained. Their movements occasionally brushed past each other, small brushes of proximity that would have startled her yesterday. Today, she didn't flinch. "Why do you live way out here?" she asked without looking up. Cole placed the meat into the pot. "Less noise. That's all." A man gets tired of answering questions he doesn't want to answer. She paused, then nodded. Her eyes lowered again. "I understand that." When the stew was ready, they sat at the table, not across from each other, but side by side, both facing the stove. Naila ate slowly, taking measured bites, as if waiting for someone to snatch the bowl away. Cole didn't rush her. He ate with calm, steady movements, giving her time to finish. After the meal, Naila set her bowl down and exhaled deeply. For the first time since arriving, her shoulders didn't look locked in defense. She had space to breathe, to think, to exist without bracing for pain. "Cole," she said quietly, you did not ask for a woman in your home. I know that." He stayed still, waiting for her to finish. "But you didn't look away from me like the men who kept me," she continued. "You looked at me like I was a person, not something to use." Cole swallowed once, a slow, controlled movement. Words didn't come easily when feelings pushed close. "You're not something to use," he said. "You're someone who was treated wrong. That's all I see." Naila looked at the floor, trying to process the weight of that sentence. It wasn't dramatic or emotional. It was simple and real, and that made it hit deeper than any promise she'd ever heard. She stood, walked to the window, and placed her hand on the frame. Her fingers were steadier now. Her voice softened. "Today, I didn't feel watched." Cole looked at her from the table, understanding exactly what she meant. "That's how it should be," he said. She turned toward him, her eyes clearer, stronger. "I want to stay near you, if you'll let me." Cole didn't hesitate. "You can stay as long as you choose." Something in her eased so visibly that it felt like the entire room warmed. For the first time, Naila wasn't surviving. She was living. The afternoon sun pushed across the open desert with a light that made every ridge line sharper and every shadow clearer. Cole Harrow tightened the last section of fencing near the southern boundary, wiping dust from his palms as he checked the post for movement. His breath came evenly, the way it always did when he worked, steady, unhurried, controlled. Behind him, Naila walked the fence line with a small tin cup she used to gather nails and splinters he might trip over later. Her steps were careful, but no longer weak. She kept glancing toward the hills, checking the distant rocks for movement the same way Cole used to when he first moved here alone. "This place is quieter than I expected," she said, holding the cup close to her body. Cole lifted a strand of wire and tested its tension. "Most people don't ride this far unless they're lost or looking for trouble." "Which were you?" she asked, not teasing, just curious. "Neither," he said, sliding the wire into place. "I wanted ground where no one asked why I kept my distance." Naila nodded slowly, studying the dry path ahead. "Then I fit here." Cole didn't respond right away. He stepped back, scanning the entire stretch of fence, making sure every corner stayed aligned. Once he was satisfied, he turned toward her. Her face wasn't as pale as yesterday, and her eyes held a sharper clarity, as if sleep and warmth finally reached the places fear had settled. "We'll head back," he said. The wind's shifting. Naila looked toward the sky. The clouds to the west had thickened into dense patches. Nothing threatening, but enough to bring a colder night. She wrapped the blanket tighter and followed him along the narrow trail. As they walked, she slowed near a cluster of scattered stones. Cole noticed it immediately. "What is it?" he asked. Naila crouched, passing her fingers over the dirt. A faint line cut across the ground, broken, shallow, but too straight to be made by wind. She leaned closer, her breath steady but thoughtful. "This wasn't here yesterday," she murmured. Cole knelt beside her, brushing the soil away from the mark. His expression changed subtly, shoulders lifting, jaw firming, eyes narrowing. The line was part of a wheel track, not deep enough to be recent, but not old enough to ignore. "Wagon passed through," he said. "Maybe 2 days ago." Naila's throat tightened. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pulled her hand away. "Could be them. Could be someone hunting coyotes," Cole replied. or moving supplies? She swallowed. You don't believe that? He didn't answer. Instead, he stood and scanned the horizon, every muscle focused. His breathing changed. Not faster, just heavier, like his body knew before his mind accepted it. Nayla stood beside him, her grip on the blanket tightening. If they find me, they won't, Cole said, his voice firm enough to stop her mid-sentence. He didn't say it to be comforting. He said it because he had already made a decision. They walked back toward the cabin in silence, both thinking about the same thing, but refusing to give it shape yet. When they reached the porch, Cole stepped aside to let her enter first, eyes still on the land behind them. He remained there for several seconds, studying the distance before finally stepping inside. Nayla was placing the tin cup on the table when he walked in. She didn't look afraid, more alert than earlier, but not frozen like the night he found her. Cole moved to the stove and added wood with deliberate calm. If someone comes, I want to know before they reach the yard, he said. Nayla approached the window and pulled the curtain slightly. The landscape outside looked still, untouched. Yet she kept her hand on the edge of the fabric, as if ready to lift it again at the slightest noise. Those men, she said, voice lower. They talk too much when they drink. I heard them brag. They don't like losing anything they think they own. Cole set the wood aside and faced her fully. You're not theirs. You're not anyone's. Nayla held his gaze for the first time without lowering her eyes. You say that like it's easy. It's not, he said, but it's true. A long, quiet moment passed between them. Solid, unbroken, filled with something neither had expected to feel in a small cabin in the middle of an unremarkable stretch of land. Nayla stepped away from the window and moved toward the table. Show me what else I can do, she said. I don't want to sit and wait for fear. Cole nodded once, approving her resolve. He handed her a coil of twine and pointed to the cracked bucket that needed repair. She picked it up without hesitation and began working, her fingers moving slowly but with growing confidence. Through the rest of the afternoon, they repaired tools, organized the corner shelves, and checked the water barrels behind the cabin. Each small task gave Nayla a piece of control she thought she had lost. Each minute around her reminded Cole why he had allowed her inside. Something about her presence steadied him in a way solitude never could. When the sun finally dipped, Cole lit the lantern. Nayla sat on the floor near the stove, shaping the twine into a new handle for the bucket. Her hair fell forward slightly, catching the warm glow of the flame. Cole, she said quietly. He looked up from the table. If they come, she paused, choosing her words carefully. You don't have to fight for me. His jaw clenched. I don't fight because I have to. Nayla stared at him, absorbing the meaning. He lowered his gaze only briefly before meeting hers again. I fight when something deserves protecting. Nayela's breath left her in a slow, steady exhale, softer than any she'd taken since arriving. Outside, the desert stayed silent. Inside, something stronger than fear finally took root. The next morning arrived with a thicker silence than usual. The sky was a washed-out gray, and the cold felt heavier, the kind that settled into the wood of the porch and lingered under the window frames. Cole stepped outside before the sun fully rose, keeping his steps light as he checked the perimeter again. He didn't tell Nayla what he suspected, not because he wanted to hide anything, but because he needed to see it with his own eyes before speaking aloud. He followed the fence line toward the east trail. The dirt carried a fresh disturbance, a half-pressed hoof print, the type made by a horse standing still for a moment before walking on. Cole crouched, tracing its edge with his thumb. The print was new enough to matter and too close to ignore. He stood, scanning the distant ridge. If someone had passed through, they hadn't come close enough to approach the cabin. Not yet, but they were searching, not wandering. Cole felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the instinct that had saved him more than once during his years drifting through mining towns. Something was coming, and he needed to be ready before it reached his doorstep. When he returned to the cabin, Nayla was already stirring the pot on the stove. Her movements were steadier today, her shoulders upright, her eyes clearer. She turned toward him, reading the tension in his posture instantly. You saw something, she said. A rider passed by before dawn, Cole replied, hanging his coat on the nail by the door. Didn't come close, but he was looking around. Naila didn't panic. She didn't collapse into fear. She stepped closer to him, her jaw tightening with quiet resolve. They're searching the trails. They'll try every path until they find what they lost. Cole met her stare. Then we make sure they don't find this one. Before either could say more, the faint sound of hooves broke the quiet. Not rushed, not cautious, controlled, steady and close. Cole motioned silently for Naila to stay behind the curtain as he stepped to the porch. Two men approached on horseback, wearing dusted coats and stiff expressions. They carried the look of travelers who weren't lost, but wanted others to believe they were just passing by. Their horses snorted and shifted as they slowed near the gate. The taller man tipped his hat. "Morning." Cole didn't return the gesture. "What do you need?" "We're looking for someone," the shorter man said. "Ran off from a trader's camp south of here. A woman. Apache." Cole felt the weight of each word, but kept his expression still. "I haven't seen anyone." The taller man leaned forward on his saddle horn. Small but strong. Dark hair. "Might be injured. You sure you haven't had visitors?" Cole stepped down from the porch. His boots pressed into the dirt with a deliberate pace. "I work alone. Haven't had company in months." Naila watched from inside, holding the curtain only high enough to see their shoulders, not their faces. Her heartbeat thudded heavily against her ribs, but her breathing stayed controlled. Cole's voice was steady, but she knew the type of men who searched without mercy. She could hear the false courtesy in their questioning. The shorter man scanned the barn, the fence, the open land behind the cabin. "Mind if we take a look around?" "Yes," Cole answered. The man blinked slowly, caught off guard. "You hiding something?" "Just protecting what's mine," Cole replied, his tone even but unmovable. A long moment stretched between them. The men exchanged a glance, one trying to read the other's thoughts without speaking. Cole stood motionless, shoulders squared, face hardening into the expression he used when walking into a saloon fight he didn't start but was ready to finish. "You're a quiet one," the tall man said finally. "Helps keep trouble away," Cole answered. Both riders shifted in their saddles. They weren't scared, but they understood something important. Cole Harrow didn't bluff. "We'll be riding west," the short man said. "If you see her, let us know." Cole didn't reply. They turned their horses, riding off with stiff postures and sharp glances over their shoulders. The moment they were far enough from sight, Cole stepped back into the cabin and closed the door, setting the latch firmly. Naila stood near the table, eyes wide but steady. "They were from the wagon," she said softly. Cole nodded once. "They didn't see you." Her fingers curled around the edge of the table. "If they come back, we'll be ready," he said, interrupting her before fear could spread. "I won't let them touch you." Naila searched his face, looking for hesitation. There wasn't any. She approached him slowly, not out of fear, out of trust she didn't expect to feel so soon. "Why?" Cole's answer came low and honest. "Because I choose to." Her breath caught, and she pressed a hand against her chest, feeling something shift inside her. Something unfamiliar but steady, like the first sign of belonging after years of running. "Then I won't run anymore," she said. Cole nodded. "Good." Outside, the trail carried the fading echo of hooves. Inside, the weight of danger pulled them closer to each other, not out of fear, but out of the quiet decision to stand together. The day after the riders passed brought a different kind of tension to the cabin, one that settled in the air even when the wind was still. Cole woke before sunrise, his body tuned to the smallest change in the land. He stepped quietly onto the porch with his rifle in hand, not lifted, not threatening, simply ready. The ground held no new prints, but the memory of yesterday's visit had hardened his instincts. Inside, Naila folded the blanket she slept in with deliberate care. She didn't hide her worry, but she didn't crumble under it either. She moved with a steadiness that hadn't been there when he first found her beside the woodpile. She tied her long hair back with a leather strip she found near the tools, her hands moving with calm precision even though her eyes kept drifting to the windows. Cole returned, closing the door softly. "Nothing yet," he said. "But they'll come back," Naila replied, voice quiet but sure. They will, Cole admitted. Men like that don't quit easy. Naila stepped closer, studying his face. You're not afraid of them. I'm not afraid of things that bleed, he answered. She didn't smile, but a small looseness softened her shoulders, as if his confidence transferred to her. Cole set the rifle on the table and checked the latch on the door again. He wasn't paranoid, just experienced. He knew the difference between caution and panic, and he knew how violence behaved when it felt challenged. We need to change the cabin, he said. Ow, Naila asked. Cole moved toward the back wall, picking up a small hammer and a handful of nails. If someone tries to force their way in, I don't want them getting far. Naila watched him kneel beside the doorway and begin reinforcing the frame. Each strike of the hammer was controlled, not loud, as if he was trying not to disturb the thin calm between them. She stepped beside him. Let me work too. He paused, studying her hands. Your wrists still hurt. They'll heal. I won't sit and wait while you do everything. Cole handed her a strip of wood. Hold this steady. She pressed it against the frame, fingers tight, but sure. He hammered the nails in place, the two of them working so close their shoulders brushed once. Neither moved away. When the frame was secured, Cole stood, wiping dust from his palms. Naila remained there for a moment, staring at the reinforced door like she was seeing a barrier she had never been given before, a boundary meant to protect her, not trap her. Thank you, she said. Cole nodded, avoiding her eyes for a second longer than usual. Something about her gratitude struck deeper than he expected. They spent the morning strengthening the cabin in small but meaningful ways, moving tools where they could reach them quickly, checking window hinges, clearing the area near the porch so no one could hide in the shadows. Naila followed Cole's instructions without hesitation, moving with the alertness of someone who had survived too much to ignore danger. At midday, they rested near the stove. Naila sliced dried roots while Cole cleaned his rifle. Neither spoke for several minutes. Silence no longer felt strange. It felt necessary, grounded, safe. Cole, Naila said finally. He looked up. I remember their voices, she continued quietly. I can point out the ones who spoke most. I can tell you how they move, how they think. Cole's expression sharpened with interest. Tell me. She set the knife down, folding her hands carefully on the table. The tall one, he's the one who talks first. He likes to sound polite, but when he drinks, he hurts people to impress the others. Cole listened without interrupting. The second one, she said, he doesn't decide anything. He copies whoever's leading. He laughs even when he's scared. Cole nodded slowly. Followers can be dangerous when they feel cornered. The last one, Naila hesitated. He doesn't talk much. He watches. He thinks before moving. Cole exhaled through his nose, a subtle sign of tension. That's the man who'll give us trouble. Naila met his eyes. He's the one who tied me the tightest. Cole's jaw tightened. He didn't voice the anger rising in him. He didn't need to. It was plain in the way his posture stiffened and his hand curled around the edge of the table. They won't take you, he said firmly. Not while I'm breathing. Naila looked at him with a calm that surprised even her. I believe you. The afternoon passed quietly as they prepared for the possibility of another visit. Cole taught her how to bar the door quickly, how to move quietly across the cabin at night, how to listen for things that didn't belong. Naila absorbed every detail, not with panic, but with growing determination. When evening came, the sky burned with a muted orange that slowly faded into the pale dimness of early night. Cole lit the lantern and stepped outside while Naila watched from the doorway. You'll hear them before I do, she said softly. Only if they come loud, Cole replied. Men like that think distance makes them invisible. Naila stepped onto the porch beside him. The cold air caught her breath, but she didn't return inside. I won't hide in the corner, she said. Not this time. Cole watched her for several seconds, measuring the strength in her eyes, seeing how much she'd recovered already. Then he nodded once. Then we stand together, he said. The night settled around them, still, cold, and expectant. And for the first time, Naila didn't feel alone in the dark. The following night arrived heavier than the last, pressing an unusual stillness across the desert. Even the wind held back, leaving the sagebrush motionless and the ground cold enough to crack under a man's step. Cole checked the yard 3 separate times before the sky lost the last trace of color. Naila watched him from the porch each time he returned, her posture steady but alert, every sense sharpened by the knowledge that the men searching for her were close, not in distance yet, but in intention. Inside the cabin, the lantern burned with a soft glow. Cole sat at the table cleaning the rifle with slow, methodical movements, wiping each part with a steady hand. He didn't rush, didn't fidget, didn't speak unless necessary. Naila sat near the stove, stitching a tear in her skirt with a piece of thread she found earlier in his toolbox. Her fingers moved with new precision. She no longer trembled when she worked. The routine steadied her. It steadied him too. "Cole," she said quietly. He paused, lifting his eyes without raising his head. "If something happens," she continued, choosing her words carefully, "I don't want to slow you down. Tell me what you need from me." Cole finished wiping the barrel before answering. "I need you to stay close. Not behind me, beside me." Naila nodded. She didn't question him. She didn't argue. Her trust came without hesitation now. Cole reassembled the rifle and set it within reach. The air in the cabin felt different, charged, waiting. As night deepened, they moved around the space with quiet coordination. Naila filled the water crock, her steps grounded and sure. Cole placed an extra piece of wood near the stove in case the cold grew harsh. Neither of them spoke much, but the silence carried something solid, like an agreement neither needed to voice. Near midnight, Cole stood up suddenly. Naila straightened instantly, eyes locked on him. "What is it?" she whispered. He raised a hand, signaling her to stay still. He turned his ear toward the north window. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then a faint sound cut through the quiet, dirt shifting beneath a cautious step. Naila's breath halted. She moved closer to Cole without thinking, her hand brushing the back of his arm. Cole lowered the lantern flame until the room dimmed to a low, amber glow. He didn't panic. He didn't hurry. He moved with deliberate calm, each step silent. Naila mirrored him, her movements careful but confident. Another sound. A second step. Someone tested their distance. Cole whispered, "Stay low." Naila crouched behind the table, her body angled so she could see both the door and the window. A third sound followed, a soft scrape of leather on wood. Someone was circling the porch. Cole stepped toward the door, keeping to the wall where the floorboards didn't creak. His hand hovered near the rifle, not holding it yet, just ready. Naila watched the shadows under the door, her pulse steady despite the tension squeezing the air. A voice outside broke the silence. "Thought you said he lived alone." Another voice answered, low and displeased. "He does. I don't see anyone else." Naila swallowed, recognizing the second voice, the quiet one she warned Cole about, the one who rarely spoke unless he meant something by it. Cole leaned closer to the door, listening. The quiet man continued, "Door's barred. Means he's still awake." A third man grunted, "We can force it." "No," the quiet one snapped. "Not yet." Naila gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles whitening. She looked at Cole, waiting for direction. Cole whispered, "They're testing us, not attacking." Footsteps shifted. Someone walked to the side window. Cole motioned for Naila to stay down as he moved a step closer to the wall. A faint tap sounded against the wooden shutter, light, probing. The quiet voice spoke again. He reinforced the frame. Naila's stomach tightened. She hadn't expected them to notice something so small from the outside. "They know," she breathed. Cole shook his head. "Knowing's not the same as acting. They don't want to fight tonight." "Then why come?" she asked softly. Cole kept his eyes toward the window, watching the shadows move. "To see if you're inside." Naila's breath stilled. Outside, the men murmured among themselves, their words low and indistinct. Another set of footsteps approached the porch. Then, 3 slow knocks. Not polite, not forceful. Testing. Cole didn't move. He didn't answer. He didn't step forward. The quiet voice spoke again, just loud enough for both of them to hear through the door. "We'll come back when he's not watching the windows." Then silence, followed by the slow retreat of boots crunching against gravel. then the fading clop of hooves heading east. Cole waited several more seconds before releasing the tight breath he'd been holding. "They'll return," Naila whispered. "Yes," Cole said. "Next time they won't knock." Naila stood slowly and walked to him. She placed her hand lightly on his arm, not for comfort, but to steady the moment. "Then I'll be ready with you," she said. Cole nodded once, the tension easing slightly in his shoulders. He reached for the lantern and raised the flame again. In the quiet that followed, their fear didn't separate them. It anchored them, two people who had chosen to stand together, no matter who came back. The next morning rose with a thin, pale sun that barely warmed the ground. The air stayed sharp, carrying the kind of silence that warned Cole Harrow's something on the land had shifted. He stepped outside with a cup of lukewarm coffee, scanning the ridge to the east before he even took a sip. His eyes narrowed at a faint stir of dust along the far trail, too controlled to be the wind, not enough movement to be wild animals. Someone was approaching, not a gallop, at a deliberate, steady pace. Inside the cabin, Naila had just finished sweeping the corner near the stove when she noticed Cole's expression through the open doorway. She set the broom aside and joined him on the porch, her feet bare against the cold wood, but her posture firm. "Are they back?" she asked. Cole didn't look away from the ridge. "One rider. Same coat as yesterday's quiet one." Naila's breath tightened. She stepped closer, her shoulder nearly touching his, steadying herself without realizing it. Cole set the coffee down on the rail. "This isn't a search. This is a message." She swallowed hard. "What kind?" "We'll see." The rider grew clearer, a broad man with a stiff spine, reins held tight, eyes already fixed on the cabin from a distance. His horse moved with slow, practiced steps, used to carrying its rider into uncomfortable conversations. Cole lifted the rifle from beside the porch post, not aiming it, just holding it where the man could see. Naila stepped behind Cole's left shoulder, staying visible but out of direct sight line. The rider stopped 20 yards from the gate. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he called out. His voice sounded different in daylight, controlled, measured, stripped of false charm. Cole didn't move. "State your business. You've got something that belongs to us." Cole's grip tightened slightly on the rifle. "No one here belongs to anyone." The rider lowered his chin. "She wasn't given to you. Doesn't matter." A tense quiet settled in the space between them. The rider leaned forward, elbows resting on the saddle horn. "We're paid to bring her back," he said, "not to ask how she got away. The man who bought her still wants what he paid for." Naila felt her stomach twist, but fear didn't control her voice this time. "I wasn't bought," she said firmly. "I was taken." The rider's attention sharpened. "I heard your voice last night. So you are here." Cole shifted slightly, enough to block more of her from view. "You've got your answer. Leave." The rider exhaled slowly. "You can't keep her." "I already am." The man studied Cole for a long moment, weighing whether he wanted to fight this early in the day. He finally shook his head once. "You're making a mistake, rancher. Men who hide stolen women end up dead." Cole didn't blink. "I don't hide anyone. I protect who needs protecting. You can't protect her from everything." Cole lifted the rifle an inch. "Try me." The rider's jaw flexed. "I've got two others a mile down. They'll come in if I don't meet them by noon." "I'll be here," Cole said. The rider waited, watching for any hint of uncertainty. Cole gave him none. Finally, with a click of his tongue, the man tugged the reins and pulled his horse back. He didn't leave quickly. He left slowly, making sure Cole understood the visit wasn't over. When he disappeared down the trail, Cole lowered the rifle and let out a slow, heavy breath. Naila moved beside him. "They won't give up." "No," Cole said, "but they'll be careful now. They saw we're ready." Naila stepped down onto the cold ground. "What do we do until they return?" Cole looked toward the barn, mind already working through every angle, every weak point in the land. "We make this place harder to approach. I'll move supplies behind the cabin. We'll use the ridge for cover if they try circling." Naila nodded. "I'll help." He turned to her. "Are you steady enough?" She lifted her chin. "I'm not the woman who hid under your blanket anymore." Cole studied her for a moment. Something in her gaze held steady fire, not fear. "All right," he said. We worked together. They spent the next hours reinforcing everything they had prepared the night before. Cole stacked heavy beams near the barn doors to create a barrier if someone tried forcing them open. Naila carried smaller boards, placing them within reach near the windows. She worked with focus, her movements sharp, determined, and sure. Cole watched her once while she hammered a latch back into place. Her hands no longer trembled. Her shoulders no longer curled inward. She carried the weight of her past, but she no longer let it anchor her down. "You're stronger than they ever thought," he said quietly. Naila lowered the hammer. "I became stronger because someone finally stood still beside me." He didn't respond, but something about the way his eyes softened showed he heard every word. By late afternoon, the sky dimmed with early shadows. Cole and Naila stood near the porch, catching their breath, scanning the ridge. "Do you think they'll come before dark?" Naila asked. "They don't like riding at night," Cole said, "but they're desperate to end this before tomorrow." Naila stepped closer, her voice steady. "Then tonight will be the hardest." "Probably." She took a quiet breath. "I won't hide." Cole turned to her. "I'm not asking you to." The moment held something solid, something that anchored them both deeper into the same ground. As the first hint of night crept across the desert, Naila placed her hand on the doorframe, grounding herself. "Whatever they bring," she said, "I stand with you." Cole's reply was simple, honest, and certain. "And I stand with you." The desert darkened, and together they faced the coming storm of men who thought they owned her. Men about to learn they were wrong. Dawn broke slowly over the desert, rolling soft light across the cabin walls and catching the edge of the windowsill in a muted glow. Cole had not slept. He stood near the northern shutter, watching the ridge where the rider had disappeared yesterday. The rifle rested against his leg, not raised, just close. His jaw was tight, but his breathing stayed steady. He had made peace with whatever the morning brought. Behind him, Naila pulled her hair into a long single braid. Her movements were calm, practiced, deliberate. Fear no longer controlled her. She was preparing not to flee, but to stay, no matter the outcome. When she stepped up beside Cole, the faint light from the window landed across her cheek, showing the strength she had reclaimed piece by piece inside these walls. "Do you see anything?" she asked softly. "Not yet," Cole answered. "But they'll try something before noon." She nodded once. "Then let's finish this." Cole looked at her, really looked, and something settled in him. A certainty he hadn't allowed himself to feel since the day he lost the woman he once tried to protect. With Naila, the weight felt different. There was no guilt, no hesitation, only clarity. He checked the outside again, scanning the land. The ridge stayed still. No dust, no silhouettes, no horses, only a wide stretch of empty earth caught under the early sun. Minutes stretched quietly. Then, a faint rumble. Hooves. One horse. Then a second. Then a third. Naila stepped back just enough to give Cole space near the window. She wasn't retreating. She was making room so they could stand side by side. Cole adjusted the rifle. "They're spreading out." Naila exhaled, steady and unflinching. "They won't catch me again. I won't let them." Cole opened a shutter, a narrow slit. 3 riders approached, the same men from before, their posture sharper, their movements rigid. They slowed near the gate, but didn't speak. Instead, the quiet one raised his hand, signaling the others to hold position while he stepped down from his horse. He approached on foot, boots crunching lightly over the cold dirt. When he stopped several paces from the porch, Cole pushed the door open and stepped outside, rifle held but not aimed. Naila followed, standing just behind his left shoulder, visible, unhidden, unclaimed by anyone but herself. The quiet man studied her first. His eyes narrowed with recognition and disappointment. "You chose to stay," he said. Naila lifted her chin. "I chose freedom." "You don't understand what waits for you out there," the man answered, voice controlled, steady. "But I do." "Then leave," she said. He shifted his gaze to Cole. "You're willing to die for someone you barely know." Cole didn't blink. "I know enough." The rider behind him snorted. "You think she'll repay you?" "She'll run when you're dead." Naila stepped forward, not behind Cole, but beside him. I'm not here because he forced me, she said clearly. I am here because I want to be. The quiet man scanned the two of them slowly, calculating what he saw. Her confidence, Cole's unwavering stance, the reinforced cabin behind them. You can't protect her forever, he said. I only need to protect her today, Cole replied, voice grounded in absolute. The man reached for his gun. Cole lifted the rifle instantly. Not aimed to kill, but aimed to stop. His stance was rigid, his shoulders squared, his fingers steady on the trigger. Nayla didn't flinch. She took another step forward, her voice sharp in the cold air. You're not taking me. The two riders on horseback shifted uneasily, not expecting resistance this controlled. They were hired men, not martyrs. The quiet one hesitated. He saw the way Cole's stance left no room for negotiation. You start a fight over her? He asked. Cole answered without looking away from him. I'd end one. The quiet man studied Cole's eyes for a long moment. A moment that stretched enough for all three of them to understand what would happen if they took a single step closer. Then he lowered his hand. Slow, deliberate, resigned. We're done here, he said. He backed up, keeping his eyes on Cole until he reached his horse. The other two men followed his lead, turning their mounts away from the cabin. None of them spoke again. None of them looked back. When they finally disappeared behind the ridge, Cole lowered the rifle and let out a breath he had held since sunrise. Nayla stepped closer, watching the empty horizon. They're gone. They won't return, Cole said. Not after today. She touched his arm, fingers light but certain. You stood for me when no one else ever did. You stood with me, he corrected. Nayela's breathing slowed. She angled her body toward him, not cautiously, not hesitantly, openly. Cole, she said softly, I want to stay here, not because I need a place, because I choose you. His chest tightened, not with pain, but with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. He lowered the rifle, letting it rest against the porch rail. I choose you too, he said. Nayela's eyes softened as she stepped into him, her forehead touching his chest. He placed a hand behind her back, holding her gently, not claiming, simply keeping her close. Hours later, as midday light settled across the desert, Cole walked with Nayla to the small patch of ground behind the cabin where the soil was softer. She knelt beside him and placed his hand against her stomach. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with certainty. I'm carrying your child. Cole felt something shift inside him, a new purpose, steady and grounding. Then we build a life here, he said, the three of us. Nayla leaned into him, eyes clear. We already started, she whispered. They stood together, the cabin behind them, the land wide and quiet before them. The danger gone, the future theirs. The story ended not with escape, but with a home, a child on the way, and two people choosing each other freely, with no fear left between them.